Welcome to The Poetry Joint, a podcast about poets, poems, and poetics. My name, Stephen Donahue. I have a scant knowledge of poetry, and that is the starting point for this podcast, to see what I can learn.
There's a light on in the attic. I can see it from the outside, and I know you're on the inside. Looking out.
Exploring good poetry, bad poetry, sonnets, couplets, ballads, rhyme, no rhyme, grand verse, silly verse, concrete poetry, liquid poetry, words with meaning, words without meaning, old poets, young poets, radical poets, ancient poets, contemporary poets, confessional poets.
Angel-headed hipsters, burning for the ancient heavenly connection to the starry dynamo in the machinery of night.
The Poetry Joint. Hang out. See where we go. Like gods, the poets ask to be heard, only to bear scrutiny from all. With figures of speech as our tools, rhythm, rhyme, and reason as our rules, we write to free inside thought. With promises of better tomorrows, free of pain and never-ending sorrows, we die so you can live. Since the invention of the Gutenberg printing press in the 1400s and even earlier in China, people have been putting ideas to paper and sharing them. Poems, broadsides, posters, handbills, chapbooks, essays, novels, music and lyrics, and more. This episode of The Poetry Joint is going to explore self-publishing as an option for the aspiring poet. You have written and collected your poems and feel that the time is right to release them to a wider audience. Calgary poet Scott Alderson, who wrote the preceding poem titled We Die So You Can Live, has self-published 9 books of poetry and gave me an overview of the self-publishing process. Scott was born in Edmonton, finished high school in Stony Plain, attended Mount Royal College as it was known then for 2 semesters. He has worked as a grocery clerk, boat trailer builder, retail salesperson, security officer, disc jockey, bicycle courier, dispatcher, and more. As a poet, early on, he bussed the streets of Calgary. Currently, he is a wheelchair-bound poet warrior in an ongoing battle with MS. Writing poetry, mentoring poets, reading poetry, and discussing self-publishing.
January 1994, so decided to publish my first chapbook of poetry called 3 Small White Mice Traveling at the Speed of Light. There was originally supposed to be myself and 2 other poets. Part of it was homage to Douglas Adams, the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I was frustrated by the rejections from trade publishers, from traditional publishing. They weren't interested in a no-name with no following. A friend of mine said, "Gee, Scott, I got a computer, we can do it on our own." He worked for a printing company, so with his help, and to this day, I credit him with my poetry career. His name is Ra and and without his help, I wouldn't have put together any of my books, nor do half the stuff I do now. Even sending an attachment in an email was foreign to me. So he's my technical guru and one of my best friends. And
Okay, I would guess first up, if you're going to publish a book of poetry, or a chapbook, or whatever, you need poems.
You need poems. You need to be a writer and come to a point in your career as a writer that you're ready to share your gift with the world at large. So you need to compile your writings into 2 piles. One pile is the poems or the writing material that you're going to put into your book, and the other is the discard pile. Because not every poem that you write, if you're a seasoned poet, or even if you're a novice, is not going to be publish worthy.
Then we talked about chapbook as a form to put your poetry in. Chapbook has approximately how many poems in it?
Less than 48 pages.
Less than 48 pages.
Yes, less than 48 pages. So that includes your introduction, dedication, table of contents, and your acknowledgments page, if you want those. Not everybody does that. Some people put it on the back cover about the author. Some people don't have a dedication, an introduction. It's not required. It's, if you just want the poem. So a reasonable chapbook ought to contain at least 40 poems. If you're going to publish in your first chapbook, ideally you want previously unpublished. There's other options. Self-publishing is the one that worked for me and continues to work for me. I now have 9 books in publication.
Okay, well, we'll go on the basis that somebody's got their poems, decided that self-publishing is the way to go, but they're not really sure all the steps they got to follow.
Excellent.
So you've got all your poems, you've got them all organized. What's the next step?
Pick a title. What are you going to call your book? Title. Title is very important. Then sequencing. So then it's a matter of sequencing, what I call the roller coaster effect of emotions. When I want a reader to read my book, I want to take them on that roller coaster. I want to go up, 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 and then I want to have crash down where they're left almost in tears. Oh my God, I can't believe how sad it is. And then up again, and then down. And by the end of the book, they're physically and emotionally exhausted because I've taken them on my journey, the journey I intended. So what we call sequencing. It's very important, and that is probably, Stephen, the hardest part of putting a book together is sequencing. So yeah, sequencing, extremely important and underrated. Some people don't realize you can't just put poem after poem after poem after poem after poem. You've got to have a specific purpose for why you chose to put your poem there. So the first poem is the most important, as is the last. Just like a short story has an introduction and it has a denouement, a conclusion, a poem is just like that from start to finish, as is a poetry book. So once you have the number of pages that the book is going to be, you have the PDF file because you've already picked the poems, you've sequenced it, you've got your cover art, you got your intro, dedication, you got the meat of the meal, which is your poetry. You've got the back cover about the author. You're all ready to go. You need to start calling around to some printing companies and finding out pricing.
Okay.
Decide how many copies you're going to do. The more copies you can do, the cheaper the print run. But when you do 100 copies, you're not going to get the same good price as you will with doing 500 copies. If you have the money. If you are going to run 100 copies and it's going to cost you $10 a copy, you're going to have to sell that at a big markup to put it into a bookstore, because a bookstore is going to typically take a consignment agreement of 60-40 split. You as the publisher and the author take 60%, the bookstore takes 40%, and they use that to cover the bookshelf space. And everything that you put into that bookstore is going to cost you more. If you want end of shelf exposure, you're going to pay an extra $1 for that. If you want a special display, you're going to pay an extra $1 a copy for that. We live in that kind of capitalist world where everything is going to cost you additional money. So you need to call around to find a good printing company to be able to put your book together.
Yeah.
You need to consult with a graphic designer if necessary. If you don't have cover art in mind for your cover, you need to talk with the graphic designer. Even with, if you have the book and the poetry and the cover art and all that kind of stuff, there are a couple more things you have to do before you're ready to send out your PDF file to the publisher, and that is the legalities of it. You need to call the National Library of Canada and speak to them about obtaining an ISBN number. An ISBN number is an abbreviation, it's an acronym for International Standard Book Number. And every bookstore that I've ever dealt with has a computer inventory of their books, so that when they take their little barcode scanner, they scan the barcode, the ISBN number is the barcode, and it comes up blip, Scott Alderson Finding Jamie. That way they keep track of their inventory for every copy sold. So you need to get what's called an ISBN number. You need to also understand legal deposit. Legal deposit is a system where the government of Canada needs to know what you're putting into print, okay? So you have to submit copies for what's called legal deposit to the National Library of Canada. And depending on the size of your print run, if you do a print run of 100 copies or less, you only have to send one copy of your book when it's printed to the National Library of Canada, and you will address it to the National Library of Canada, legal deposit, and they will put it in the archives once you have the ISBN number from them and you have the book in print.
Oh, okay.
Once it's in print, you're going to mail off 2 copies. One copy is going to be to yourself for the purpose of copyright. You'll send off 1 copy if you do less than 100 copies of your book in print that you're going to offer for public consumption. But if you're going to go and put them into a bookstore, then you have to submit for legal deposit. So if you do 100 copies or less, you have to send 1 copy of your book when it's in full form printed. If you do 101 copies or more, you have to send 2 copies. And the reason for that is 1 copy will go into the archives and 1 copy will go into the actual library. When you go to the post office to send off your copies in a sealed envelope to the National Library of Canada, you need to put for legal deposit underneath it, under a special asterisk. You're also going to mail off a copy to yourself. You're going to address it to yourself as the sender and as the receiver. And underneath it, you're going to write, for the purpose of copyright, and the title of your book. And you're never going to open that again. You're going to put that on a shelf in your closet or a drawer. And if it's ever challenged in court that, hey, I wrote the poem Magnificent on July 16th, 2024, and somebody in November publishes a poem called Magnificent and it's your poem, you can challenge them in court and say, no, I wrote that poem on July 16th, 2024. I have the evidence in the sealed envelope. That is the only time you will open that envelope. Put that, though, for the purpose of copyright, and you have to send it registered mail. The Canada Post carrier is going to come to your door with your registered mail and say, I have a package for you to sign for. You sign for it. That is the easiest way without going to a lawyer to establish copyright. Now in Canada, we have the benefit of intellectual property. As soon as I write something and I put my name to it, I have the copyright on it. Once you've completed legal deposit, you've sent your copies off, you will receive notification from them, a little slip of paper that says, here's your receipt. So you've got the book, you've got your ISBN number, you've done the copyright, you've submitted for legal deposit after getting them printed, and now you've got 497 because you used one of the copies from your print run of 500 for copyright and you sent the 2 for legal deposit. So I hope that answers some of those questions, but the big thing is, because you're the chairman of the board of your own writing career, you need to be comfortable promoting your work. Economist, you've got to keep track of all the expenditures, the gas that it costs you to go and deliver the books to the different bookstores. You need to be able to itemize those inventory and every coffee that you purchased when you're out there doing your job, stuff like that. All the expenses like you would do as any self-employed businessman,
Right.
As a courier. So then you need to establish contact with bookstore.
That's part 1 of a conversation on self-publishing with some input from Scott Alderson. Later episode, we'll probably cover getting your book out there and ideas on how to promote yourself. Here's Scott reciting a couple of his poems.
Somebody came to me one time and they said, you've got the gift of gab, Mr. Alderson. Why aren't you a waiter? That was before I ended up in a wheelchair. Why aren't you a waiter like some fancy restaurant like La Caillou on the Bow or the Keg even, where you could get these wicked tips because you are personable, you have the gift of gab? And I said, I'll tell you why not. So I wrote this poem called Restaurant Misunderstanding. She spewed venom at the waiter because her soup was cold. He didn't cook it, but he sure got told of its bland taste, diarrhea texture, virtual lack of pizzazz. And when he offered to return it free of cost, she threatened to get him fired, demanded to speak to his boss regarding his incompetence. He thought she said impotence and knocked her on her ass. Unemployment suited him well. So I have pieces like you asked for samples. I can read you samples that I have on the top of my head because I've performed them so many times. And those are pieces that I'm known for. Those are performance pieces. So they go beyond just being live on the page. There's the way they're delivered. I'll give you an example. And I'll use the one that I mentioned about the Hells Angels encounter, and it's called Mistake. Oops, sorry, didn't see your colors, your Hells Angels MC banner. Had I, probably wouldn't have punched you when you pushed me. As I sit in this emergency room, I find remorse, and the remaining members of your chapter here keeping me company genuinely add to this, of course. Big mistake. Had I thought even to hesitate, a nose would not be broken, angry words would not be spoken, two warriors would not have met.
Next on this episode, we go halfway around the world and back in time over 1,200 years. Here are some poems by Li Po, a prominent poet of the Tang Dynasty era. The Tang Dynasty era, from 618 to 907, was considered a golden age of Chinese poetry. Li Po, the poet, left home at 24 to wander the Yangtze River Valley and write poetry.
At Golden Ridge. Golden Ridge City tucked into the earth, the river flowing past, curving away. There were once 1,000,000 homes here, and crimson towers along narrow lanes. A vanished country, all spring grasses, the palace buried in ancient hills. This moon remains, facing timeless islands across thereafter lake waters, empty. Drinking alone beneath the moon, among the blossoms, a single jar of wine. No one else here, I ladle it out myself. Raising my cup, I toast the bright moon, and facing my shadow makes friends 3, though moon has never understood wine, and shadow only trails along behind me. Kindred a moment with moon and shadow, I found a joy that must infuse spring. I sing, and moon rocks back and forth. I dance, and shadow tumbles into pieces. Sober, we're together and happy. Drunk, we scatter away into our own directions. Intimates forever, we'll wander carefree and meet again in Star River distances. Clear Creek Chant. It renders the mind clear. Clear Creek, its water unrivaled for such pure color. I can gaze into the bottom of its always fresh repose. Is there anything like this brilliant mirror in which people walk? It's a wind painting birds cross through, and at nightfall, shrieking monkeys leave all lament over distant wandering empty.
Those were the poems At Golden Ridge, Drinking Alone Beneath the Moon, and Clear Creek Chant. The reading and translation of those poems was by David Hinton, originally for the independent online magazine Terrain.org. Terrain.org, founded with the idea of bringing together poetry, creative nonfiction, and fiction. It is a website well worth the visit. David Hinton himself has published books of poetry and essays, as well as translated a varied mix of ancient Chinese poetry and philosophy. His website, davidhinton.net, provides more insight into this contemporary writer, and it is also well worth the visit. Interestingly, an interview with CJSW podcaster Jenny Kwong earlier this year revealed her interest in Tang Dynasty poetry.
And so I've been reading poetry off and on from the Tang Dynasty. I have a small volume of Tang Dynasty poems that I will return to again and again, because it's something that I feel is something that I will be learning throughout my life, and not just one moment in time.
A final footnote on the poet Li Po. Some say he drowned when he fell as he leaned from a boat to try and grab the moon's reflection in a river. I've just discovered a few CDs in the CGSW library from 2009, a Single Onion compilation, a Flywheel compilation, and Calgary Slam Champions from 2009. Here's one of those. It's Titi Sunuga.
So it is where our dreams were first conceived, birthed over rhythm and melody, spoken around drum circles, echoing the stories of our ancestors. It is where our mouths first gave voice to language. The foundation of all that we are was laid in every inch of this land you call Africa. But I call her mother, so let me tell you about my mother. She, like poetry, is endless, and she wears the smile of 1,000 rising suns. She is lush green and vibrant red, sugarcane sweet, beaten but never broken. Let me tell you about her spirit, worth more than the price of oil or sugar, sparkles brighter than stolen diamonds. She is more than bodies broken by disease or mouths silenced by hunger. She is a hope that never dies, voices raised in eternal gratitude, a heart that breaks and bleeds, love, beautifully flawed. So when you ask me why I stand tall and proud, I will tell you, it is because I exist. One amen to a billion choir prayers, because my name was chosen with purpose. Titi, which means forever, so that every time that I am called, voices breathe infinity into everything that created me. Because I am my mother's daughter, she exists in every fiber of my being, and she has placed the mark of all her stories on my tongue like Holy Communion, so I know nothing but to speak of her now, perfect in all her imperfections, and in quiet moments I hear her still, steady rhythm to my spirit's dance.
And also Melvina Germaine with a poem from Calgary Slam Champions 2009.
You know, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. That's what I'm thinking as time passes by. I woke up this morning about 4:45, sad to see another day, sad to be alive. Baby, I got the blues. Now that I'm alone, wondering what you're doing, I don't want to pick up the phone. Everybody wants the truth, yet everybody lies. That's what you did before you said goodbye. I got the blues, baby, feeling like a fool, blinded by my love in my heart for you. Now you up and left me and took my best friend too. Baby, what were you thinking? What did I do? I tried to help her get back on her feet. Now I wish I left that bitch sleeping in the streets. You took all my money and my credit cards too. I don't have a dime. I don't even have food to feed for kids. What am I supposed to do? Baby, I got the blues. They say there's a reason for everything we do. So why was I so foolish to fall in love with you? I got the blues, baby. as the tears fall from my eyes. I look toward the ceiling and wonder if I'll die. My heart is aching. I can't sleep at night. My eyes dark from crying. I look a terrible fright. I got the blues, baby, and I'm wondering why you treated me so bad. You took everything, baby, everything I had. You left me with 2 forks, 2 knives, 2 plates, 2 spoons. Well, you even cleaned out the whole living room. I got the blues, baby. Yes, indeed, I do. You know they turned off my lights yesterday. Coming back to turn off my gas tomorrow. And I'm sitting here with a full cup of sorrow. Well, baby, I got the blues. You didn't have to do me like that. We came a long way from the hood, baby. Now I might have to go back. Death is looking good, but I'm wondering why. Because you know what, baby? Everybody want to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
The next words are by one Sun Ra, who by his own account was abducted by aliens, taken to the planet Saturn, where the aliens instructed him to use music and lyrics as a way to communicate a message of peace to a world in chaos. The Satellites Are Spinning by Sun Ra. The satellites are spinning. A new day is dawning. The galaxies are waiting for planet Earth's awakening. Oh, we sing this song to a brave tomorrow. Oh, we sing this song to abolish sorrow. The satellites are spinning. A better day is breaking. The galaxies are waiting for planet Earth's awakening. As we near the end for this episode of the Poetry Joint, many thanks to Scott Alderson for his insight into self-publishing, David Hinton for the wonderful readings and translations of Li Po's poetry. Thank you to Sun Ra for his words. Also, thank you to 2009 Calgary Slam champions Titi Sunuga and Melvina Germaine for their contributions. We'll be back again in a month's time. Scott did have one other thing to say about self-publishing.
And whether you're going to offer it for public consumption, you touched on, are you going to just give copies to your immediate family and your close friends? Then you don't need to do an ISBN number and you don't need to do legal deposit.
Let's try and fit one more in. Keith Worthington from the Single Onion compilation from 2009.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share a little bit of my poetry. Synchronicity. It is a winter poem that should have been enjoyed months ago, but wasn't. So one spring day, I read with my students Robert Frost's The Woodpile. And the very next day, I'm telling you the very next day, not 2 minutes from our city school, a woodpile is erected. It is the remains of a front yard spruce tree, climbed and stripped and cut by hired hands. Unlike Frost, I am not intrigued by this neatly piled stack of wood, though its creators are still there, busying themselves with the cleanup of spruce boughs, dry needles, and pale sawdust. But I am intrigued by the way experiences align themselves just beyond our understanding, like approaching figures cloaked in fog. One day, you hear the name of an acquaintance from years ago. The next, you see her at an entrance to an elevator. You think about an old friend for the first time in a long time. Hours later, he calls. You're driving on your way to visit her, and your song comes on the radio. The cylinders tumble so smoothly into place.
We sing this song to about a bally sorrow, a bally sorrow.